This is the Ball Talk Podcast, presented by Nachos and Analysis.
What's going on, Tiger fans? Today is Thursday, March 2nd, and welcome to the 5th episode of the Ball Talk Podcast, presented by Nachos and Analysis. I'm your host, Drew Archer, and let's talk some ball. Well, after a week, or after a podcast that I began the episode cracking a beer in celebration last week after the baseball team started 4-0 in the Eric Bakich era, the softball team was undefeated. There's no beer to crack here today. Not the ideal week, especially for Clemson baseball. The softball team drops their first game to Tennessee. But since we've last spoke, baseball team is on a 4-game losing streak. So not the week that we wanted on the baseball diamond. But we're going to get into all that. We got some guests for today's show. We have former Clemson head coach and current associate head coach with the South Carolina Gamecocks, Monte Lee, joining the show, as well as Chris Phillips from the Spurs Up Show. Many Clemson fans will know that name. He's not very popular amongst the Clemson fan base, but we appreciate both of these guys hopping on with me to preview this South Carolina series, the biggest rivalry in college baseball. But let's look at some highlights from this week, or lowlights, depending on how you look at it. So the softball team, as we mentioned, dropped its first game this season to Tennessee in somewhat of a controversial fashion. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. But despite dropping their first game of the season, the Tigers move in 2 separate polls to 4th nationally, the highest ranking in the young program's history. As I'm recording this, there's a doubleheader scheduled today for softball. I'm recording on March the 1st for this episode to release the 2nd. So I actually just hit record at 3:02, which means the softball team is about to start, which I got notifications set up on my phone here. So if you catch me looking at it, I'm getting updates from the softball game with Gardner Webb. So that's going on as I'm recording. Then, as we mentioned, UCF comes into Doug Kingsmore Stadium and sweeps the Tigers. After starting 4-0 in Coach Bakich's first 4 games, the Tigers dropped 4 consecutively. There's a couple things that kind of garnered a lot of attention on social media after this. One of which was a video put out by UCF. I don't think it was UCF official account, but one of the players, I believe it was Plumlee, the center fielder who used to be the quarterback at Ole Miss. But if you have not seen it, after Sunday's victory against the Tigers, and still in full uniform, the UCF team runs down the hill in Death Valley and does their home run celebration when they get to the bottom. Me personally, I don't mind it. They were having fun. They earned it on the field. They whooped the Tigers. But there was a lot of backlash. There was an article going around, I believe by Zach Lentz shared it. I'm not sure who wrote it, but basically saying that UCF owes Clemson an apology. I don't think that UCF owes Clemson anything. Clemson got whooped. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And I don't know. If you want to quiet them down, you got to beat them. And that kind of leads into our next topic here. Coach Bakich was not all that happy with the UCF program, how they conducted themselves in Doug Kingsmore Stadium this past week. He had this to say Sunday after the game: "It sucks right now and leaves a very bitter taste in our mouth, especially with a team that's very mouthy in the way that they celebrate on our own field. my response to that, and I have nothing but respect for Coach Bakich, and I think he's the right man for the job. However, if you want them to not be mouthy, it's up to your team to shut them up. So the Tigers did not do that, did not get it done, and the bleeding did not stop because on Tuesday, the Tigers traveled to Greenville to play USC Upstate at Fluor Field and lost to the Spartans, I believe, for the second time in 3 years. So, not the week that you want heading into this rivalry series. What optimism and hope that you had after opening weekend, starting 4-0. You got a lot more question marks now. And unfortunately, this South Carolina team is really hot right now, and that's not the way you want to head into this series. But we will get more into that shortly, and we'll get into it with our guests, Coach Lee and Chris Phillips as well. But first, let's talk some softball. All right, so as I mentioned, as I'm recording this, everything I'm saying is kind of null and void when it comes to the record. As you notice up here in the top of the screen, I have softball's record, but they are currently starting, as I'm recording, the first game of a doubleheader with Gardner-Webb at McWhorter Stadium. So by the time this airs, there will be 2 more games added to that record. Hopefully they're in the win column. But the softball team with a 15-1 record, their only loss coming to number 9 Tennessee. They lost that game 1-0. We'll talk about that game here in a minute. But the last weekend started off at the USF softball tournament, and they faced USF on Thursday as this episode or last week's episode was dropping. The Tigers won that game 6-0. Redshirt juniors Valerie Cagle and Aaliyah Logaleo each hit home runs. Millie Thompson threw her first solo shutout of the season. Thompson faced 24 batters, allowed only 3 hits, and struck out 6 batters without giving up a walk. She improved to 4-0 on the season. Then Friday, the Tigers faced Illinois of Chicago. They won that game 9-2. Clemson tallied a program record with 7 stolen bases in this game. The 7 stolen bases surpassed the previous mark of 6 set against Winthrop in 2021. Mackenzie Clark tied the program record with 3 individual stolen bases, while Allie Miklesh, sorry if I mispronounced that, Miklesh had 2, and Maddie Moore and Julia Bumhart each stole 1. So you got to like the base running. Stealing 7 bases in softball has got to be insanely hard, just with the size of the field and being able for a catcher being able to get the ball out there to second. They obviously knew something or saw something in that catcher that they know that they could put that to the test. Then Saturday they faced Michigan State, the first game of a doubleheader. This is where I was listening to this game on the radio as I was traveling back to Clemson from Greenville. And as that game it was a little bit of a slow start for the Tigers. And that's when I'd never really considered the fact that they're getting their toughest competition, Tennessee, immediately following that game in a doubleheader, both games starting before noon after playing a night game the day before. So this team was probably a little bit fatigued. They were able to pull out a victory against Michigan State 4-1. Brooke McCubbin got the start in the circle. The sophomore pitched her first complete game of the season with 8 strikeouts, while only allowing 4 hits and giving up 1 walk. She finished the game retiring the final 14 batters, dating back to the 3rd inning, and she improved to 2-0 on the season. And as I mentioned, the Tigers turned around and immediately faced number 9 Tennessee. The story of this game, which I didn't get a chance to watch it because I was out at Doug Kingsmore Stadium, but my brother was texting me about it, and this game came down to a controversial call. It was a pitcher's duel, but with 2 outs, Tennessee's runner came home on a close play at first that resulted in the batter being ruled safe. There was a lot of questions whether that batter made it to first in time, but the umpires ultimately ruled them safe, which allowed that run with 2 outs to score. So Tennessee winning that game, edging the Tigers out 1-0. And then on Sunday, the Tigers wrapped up the tournament. They faced Michigan State again in back-to-back days at 9 a.m. This one was a 5-inning run rule game. The Tigers won it 8-0. Millie Thompson pitched her 3rd complete game of the season and her 2nd solo shutout to improve to 5-0 on the year. The junior had only faced 17 batters in her 5 innings of work, struck out 6 and only allowed 2 hits, all while not giving up a single walk. So a big weekend for the softball team, suffering its first loss, but I don't think you got to worry about this team. I think, like we've touched on the last few episodes, this might be the strongest team we've seen so far with Coach Rittman. So nothing to be worried about here. Some highlights from the weekend. They're ranked 4th in 2 polls, highest in the program's history. They were on a 14-game winning streak till they faced Tennessee. That was the 3rd longest in program history. That streak comes to an end. Who they have next? This weekend, they're facing Syracuse. Syracuse comes to McWhorter Stadium. The Orange are 6-6 currently on the season. Games are Friday at 4 p.m., Saturday at 1 p.m., and Sunday at noon. You hope you can get this Friday game in. Same with Friday's matchup against the Gamecocks over at Doug Kingsmore Stadium. Weather as of now on Wednesday not looking great, but we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Syracuse, they went 1-3 in the ACC Big Ten Challenge. If you remember the week prior, Clemson went 4-0 in that. They lost 2 games to Purdue and split 2 games with Iowa. And then their midweek game next week will be against Mercer at McWhorter Stadium at 6 p.m. So softball team continues to roll. They bounced back after this first season's loss and beat Michigan State, and got doubleheader right now with Gardner Webb. So our Twitter poll of the week. Reminder, the only way to vote in this is if you actually follow us on Twitter. So if you do not follow Nachos and Analysis on Twitter, give us a follow. We post this each week, Monday or Tuesday, to discuss. The more commentary, the better. So if you have an opinion, comment on it. We hit some comments last week. We're going to hit some today. But this week's poll of the week is, what do you think the outcome will be this weekend against South Carolina in the Rivalry series? We touched on the fact that the Tigers are currently on a 4-game losing streak. This South Carolina team's hot right now, and that's not the momentum that you want to have heading into this series. The options in the Twitter poll were Clemson sweeps the Gamecocks, Clemson wins the series 2-1, South Carolina wins the series 2-1, or South Carolina sweeps the series. So 4 options there. Let's take a look at some of the Twitter comments. Cody Smith checks in and says, was thinking we take 1 of 3, but now we're probably getting swept. Jared Allen, a little critical here of Jack Leggett, tagging him in the post. I hope Jack Leggett weighs in. He will consult the future. Justin says Clemson will be lucky to get 1. A Clemson fan responds, reality is one of the middle 2, but each fan base wants the first and last. That would be the sweeps. And then Will Schaub gets in and says, this question is a lot harder to answer after these past 4 games, but baseball is a tricky game. If we thought UCF was mouthy, then South Carolina will easily surpass them. Hoping for the best. # go Clemson. So a lot of fans getting in. Actually had one other. Let's see, where'd it go? Daniel Hooper gets in. Can I change my answer? So He evidently posted or voted for one, and after USC Upstate's loss, he decided he wanted to change his answer there, though. So Clemson sweeps. Clemson wins 2-1. South Carolina wins 2-1, or South Carolina sweeps. The results were a little bit closer than I thought. The winner, or the selection that got the most votes, was South Carolina wins the series 2-1 with 34% of the vote. Then you have some optimistic Clemson fans saying that Clemson will win 2-1 for second place. With 24% of the vote, the fans voted that South Carolina sweeps the series. And the really optimistic group, 13% think that Clemson will sweep South Carolina. I don't see that happening. Maybe if this past weekend went a little bit differently, maybe. But this is a rivalry series. These teams take it very seriously. One team's got all the momentum, one does not. We'll talk with it a little bit with Coach Lee here in a few minutes, but momentum may or may not play a factor in this game. So that's this week's poll of the week. Again, follow us on Twitter, where you can have your voice heard each week when we discuss this poll. Before we get to baseball, I want to shout out our sponsor, Pump Monkey Septic Service. Really appreciative of Pump Monkey for sponsoring the Ball Talk podcast. Couldn't think of a better sponsor for this show. Pump Monkey Septic Service is owned and operated by Clemson alumni who still live here in the upstate and service the upstate. So, septic service, that's one of those things you never really think about till you need it. Make sure that you remember Pump Monkey when you need a septic tank service. They're very easy to get a hold of. You can reach them on Facebook and Instagram, as well as phone via text or call. Their phone number is 864-710-2211. Again, 864-710-2211. When the dump's funky, call Pump Monkey. All right, Clemson baseball. As we've reiterated so far, after starting 4-0, the Tigers drop 4 consecutively. They get swept by UCF and then lose to USC Upstate at Fluor Field in Greenville on Tuesday. The way this UCF series shook out, they lose Friday's game, which transitioned into Saturday 4-2, lose Saturday 10-7, Sunday 13-6. Friday weather was an issue. You had 2 stoppages before ultimately postponing the 9th inning to Saturday before game 2. The debacle of managing this by the umpires there was a head scratcher. It rained for a good portion of the early game, and they make a decision to stop the game as the rain stops. I think the stoppage was somewhere around an hour. So almost the entire time that the game was stopped due to weather, they put the tarp out there, everything. It's not raining. They start back up, and so does the rain. So out there in the Cajun Cafe, we were huddled up against tents or under tents, spent a lot of idle time waiting and that kind of stuff. So had they not stopped that game the first time, we would have been able to get it all in on Friday night. But they turned around and started it at 1 o'clock Saturday, finished up the 9th inning. They started that 9th inning with 2 runners on base, first and second, if I'm not mistaken, no outs, a 2-2 tie game. And UCF handled business there. They scored a couple more insurance runs, and the Tigers were not able to get it done in the bottom half of the 9th inning to lose game 1. Saturday in game 2, the story of that game was multiple 4-run innings. Twice, not once, but twice, the Tigers gave up 4 runs in an inning Saturday, turned around Sunday to give up 3 in an inning, and then 5 in an inning. So where the Tigers were down and were able to battle back and tie or bring the game within a close margin, each time UCF was able to put together a multiple run inning to pull ahead. If we're talking pitching, it has not been terrible. It has not been terrible out of our weekend starters. Now, Ryan Ammons is the surefire guy. Both of his performances so far have been pretty solid, and I think you're going to continue to see him there in that Friday spot going forward. However, the other two guys, they weren't throwing bad. They were getting strikeouts. However, they were putting it on a platter for all of those batters. Fastballs right down the middle, just getting asked to get hit out of the park. It's what we knew heading into this season. The pitching staff was probably going to be the weakest unit on this team. A week after stealing 21 bases, the Tigers were clearly scared of UCF's catcher there. There were opportunities that they could have attempted a steal that they would have the week prior against Binghamton that runners did not decide to. That catcher, he had an arm on him, and this Clemson team did not really want to test him. The guy that was catching for Binghamton the prior week, he couldn't hardly make it to second base without skipping it. So what you thought was a big stat that was going to be a big part of the game, which it still definitely can be, but when you face a better team, you're going to see less of those stolen bases. So, and then it did not take long for the Jack Leggett slander to start popping up after a weekend sweep and a loss to USC Upstate in Greenville. All over Twitter, all over the message boards, in conversations I've had with various folks. People are attributing this to Jack Leggett. I guess they think that he's whispering in Bakic's ears and trying to control things from behind the scenes and that kind of stuff. I find it kind of amusing and comical. I've made some comments before with some folks. I'm happy that Coach Leggett is back. I'm interested to see how it goes. Is this a little experiment that could go poorly? I don't know. After his firing 7 years ago, he was pretty upset. He held a grudge with the university. He never really seemed to heal or move on from that, and has had some pretty strong opinions. So I don't know. But to put some of this on Jack Leggett, to throw his name out there that this is part of the problem, I think that's a little premature there. But fans are talking. If I'd love to hear your thoughts. We reference follow us on Twitter. Hit us up. What are your thoughts on this Jack Leggett situation? Is him being in the dugout an issue? Before Saturday's game or Sunday's game, he was out giving a tour of Doug Kingsmore Stadium with a Little League team out there. So he's definitely back. He's definitely involved, and some fans don't seem to be all too happy about it. And then one other thing on this weekend, the Cajun Cafe, they at least once or twice a weekend usually try to send some food to the coaches, to the umpires, to the TV crew that's covering the game. And when it came time to deliver food Sunday after the final nail in the coffin, I was like, pick me. I raised my hand. I was like, can I please take this food to the dugout? Because I just wanted to get a sense of what it was like down there following the third consecutive loss, getting swept by UCF. And when I tell you that it was the most awkward and uncomfortable I've ever felt, that is not an exaggeration. We walked through the dugout. Players were picking up things and organizing, and it was dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. Nobody was making eye contact with anybody. Everybody staring at the ground. Coach Leggett was over off to the side jotting something down on a piece of paper. And then Coach Bakich just kind of standing at the front of the dugout with his hands on his hips, just kind of like staring off into the distance. And it was awkward. I volunteered. I was excited because I did want to get a vibe and a sense of what it was like down there post loss, and I almost regretted it. It was very uncomfortable. We dropped the food off and did not hang around. We dipped out of there really quick. So if you wonder how this coaching staff took that, they did not take that loss lightly. They were very upset. So it's also one of those situations that we had to wait before we could take the food down there because they were huddled up in the dugout for quite a while. And usually when those dugout meetings go on for 5-10 minutes, it's usually after a loss, and it's usually not pretty. So I don't know what I was expecting, but I definitely felt uncomfortable in that scenario there. But after that, Tigers, as we said, lose to USC upstate at Fluor Field. Brad Owens was on the broadcast with Qualkenbush on the radio, and he reiterated that trying to get a game at Fluor Field prior to the South Carolina series is always something they do to try to just get the players familiar with the ballpark and that sort of thing. So that it's a very intentional thing they do. So they're going to play 2 games there in 5 days. Hopefully, though, this Saturday against South Carolina is a little bit different outcome than the one we saw on Tuesday. And as I mentioned, the South Carolina series here. The Tigers host South Carolina at 6 p.m. on Friday, weather pending. I really want to get this game in. I do not want to have another scenario where we were, I guess it was 2 years ago, the Friday home game against Carolina got rained out and was played later in the year. But Friday in Clemson, Saturday at Fluor Field in Greenville at 1 o'clock. And then they travel to Columbia, to Founders Park, to face the Gamecocks at 1:30 there. So you got a tough team coming into Clemson Friday night. They are off a midweek win against, I believe it was North Carolina A&T. They're currently 9-0 heading into this series, while Clemson just 4-4. After the South Carolina series, the Tigers host East Tennessee State at 4 p.m. on Tuesday and Presbyterian at 4 p.m. on Wednesday. So a 2 midweek game week here for the Tigers. So Tigers got a lot of baseball to play here in a very short amount of time. They have 5 games in 6 days. You got to right the ship. You cannot keep losing because this could snowball and get really bad really quickly. You want to see the Tigers bounce back. And with it being a rivalry series, I think you're going to see a little extra juice out of Clemson. They're probably going to play better than they did against UCF. They're going to play up to their rival. They're going to play up to the competition. You just don't want to see this end in another sweep and end up on a 7-game losing streak. That would not be the ideal way to start this season off. And I don't know what other fans' expectations are, but you got to keep them in check. This is year 1 of a new program, new coach. He's working with what Coach Lee left behind, and he's going to implement his system. I don't think that fans need to look too far or too hard into what we've seen so far. Just like you shouldn't overreact like maybe I did last week after going 4-0. I'd say keep yourself in check with these current 4 losses. But nonetheless, this is a big rivalry series. The Gamecocks have beaten Clemson in basketball. They've beaten Clemson in football. You don't want to get swept in the big 3 sports by your rival. So big weekend coming up. And on that note, we're going to go ahead and transition to our guest. As I mentioned, Coach Monte Lee joins me. I had the opportunity to Interview him last night, just moments after their midweek game against North Carolina A&T. So appreciate his time there. And then immediately after that interview, is going to transition right into our interview with Chris Phillips of the Spurs Up Show. So without further ado, here's Monte Lee and Chris Phillips. Today we're joined by South Carolina Associate Head Coach Monte Lee. Thanks for joining the show, Coach.
No problem at all. Thanks for having me.
So just a few moments ago, the Gamecocks wrapped up their midweek game with North Carolina A&T, moved to 9-0. What were the keys to tonight's 11-3 win against A&T?
Well, we got a great start. I mean, we got off to a great start. James Hicks threw a couple of innings in his start. Eli Jones backed him up, threw very, very well. And, I mean, going into the seventh inning, we hadn't given up a hit. We scuffled a little bit in the seventh inning. A&T did a good job of hitting with runners on base and cutting the lead from 4-0 to 4-3, and our guys just responded. I mean, we bounced back, responded with a 5-run inning, and kind of blew it open late. But offensively, we just did a really nice job of tacking on runs late in the game, continuing to put together quality at bats, and just had a really nice night offensively. Not necessarily early in the game, even though we scored leadoff home run. Scored 4 runs through 7, I believe, and then kind of blew it open late. But all in all, it was a good night for us.
What does the momentum that this team has mean for the Gamecocks heading into this big rivalry series this weekend?
Well, in one of my favorite quotes of all time when it comes to baseball is "Momentum is today's starting pitcher," and it really that's really what it boils down to. You can be really riding the hot hand as a team or struggling as a team, and it just takes one starting pitcher to come out and put together a good game and a quality start for you, to get your team going back in the right direction. And that's why I don't put a whole lot of stock into teams who are playing really well or struggling, just because I know in the game of baseball it just takes that one starter to come out and do a great job to get your team going in the right direction again. And I think that's certainly going to be the case for both clubs coming into the weekend. Our starting rotation's been very, very good with Sanders, Hall, and Mahoney, and obviously I'm fairly familiar with the Clemson Tigers and what they're doing on the mound too. And Ryan Ammons is a bulldog competitor. He's very, very good. He's going to give him a chance every time he toes the rubber.
Absolutely. Tiger fans have loved what they've seen out of Ammon so far. And you kind of touched on my next question about pitching, but the bats have been really hot to start the season as well. Who in this lineup is going to give the Clemson pitchers some problems this weekend?
Well, we have a pretty balanced lineup when it comes to the guys that we have in there. Um, Braylon Wimmer, our shortstop is a really good offensive player. He's been doing a great job for us. We've got a veteran at second base, and Will McGillis, who's having a good year. Caleb Denny in left, swinging the bat really well. Gavin Costas, our first baseman, has some power. He's a power threat. Cole Messina's been hitting in the 4 holes, been catching, playing some first base for us. He's been swinging the bat really, really well. So, we've got a number of guys who just do a good job for us. Talmadge LaCroix has been playing third and catching something for us. Petrie, Ethan Petrie was, by one publication, I think the player of the week in all of college baseball last week. He's a freshman playing right field. He's been on fire here lately. So, for us, it's really, kind of a 9 versus 1 mentality. It's not necessarily like one guy. It's really, a number of, right now it's 7 to 8 guys in that lineup who are doing good things, swinging the bat well, taking our walks, getting on base, just putting together, quality at bats and just doing a really good job.
After stints at College of Charleston and at Clemson, you returned to the dugout there in Columbia. What do you remember most about your time as an assistant previously there in this rivalry series? You had some good Gamecock teams back then when you were previously on the staff?
Well, we just, just again, I think it's it's just such an honor, and it always has been. I mean, my time at South Carolina as an assistant, and now that I'm back, it's been a lot has happened in between my two stints as an assistant here at South Carolina, but and even as a head coach at Clemson, it's just always been just special memories of being a part of the greatest rivalry in college baseball, just to be in the dugout and having that unique experience of having been in both dugouts on both sides of it. It's just been an honor, for me personally. So I've just always just had such a level of respect for the rivalry, because both of the programs have been so good. And it means so much to the people of South Carolina. It means so much to the players. And I'm a South Carolina guy. I was born and raised in the state of South Carolina. So just being able to be a part of it on both sides is very, very special to me. And I know it is to the players and to all the fans involved.
Absolutely. And that one last question before I let you go, and you kind of touched on it. You have the unique perspective of being on both sides of the rivalry. You got three guys in the Gamecock dugout that played for you at Clemson. I saw where I believe French got his first start behind the plate this season tonight. And then you
Yeah.
got some guys on the other side that you recruited and coached at Clemson. What are you most looking forward to this weekend?
Honestly, it's just about the players. I mean, it's just about the players. It's just about the competition between two great programs. The players know just how much the rivalry means to the state of South Carolina and the fan bases, and the crowds are tremendous. So it's a lot of fun as a player. To be able to play in such an intense environment at all three ballparks. Where it's again, just tons of energy in the ballpark, and every pitch matters, and it's just a big deal to the players. For the coaches, it's pretty stressful. I'll be honest. I mean, it's you can definitely feel the intensity of the moment, pitch by pitch. Mark and I used to talk all the time, and Chad as well. When I was at Clemson, I would talk to those guys all the time, and it's like, as much as I love, the three games, it's Monday. Monday doesn't look so bad when it gets here. Just you just feel like you've been just hit by a freight train after just dealing with the level of stress. But it's what it's all about. And again, it's just a level of respect for the opportunity to be a part of it. It's as good as it gets, and it's a lot of fun. And just looking forward to the players. It's a special group of kids to me at Clemson. And there's a lot of those kids I coached and recruited. And, one thing that's never going to change, I love every one of them. And I always will. And I want them to have tremendous success. And, I'm in the other dugout. That part will probably be a little weird, just because I do love those kids so much. But, I love the kids that we have here at South Carolina. And they've really bought into, what we're trying to get them to do and playing great baseball. So, but just looking forward to just a great weekend of two great programs just competing as hard as they can against each other.
Well, Coach, I really appreciate your time, and appreciate how you've always been good to us at Nachos and Analysis. You got a lifelong fan in me, and wish you success, and hope for a competitive rivalry series this weekend.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Appreciate you having me on, and look forward to seeing you this weekend.
Absolutely. Thanks, Coach. All right. Today, we are joined by host of the Spurs Up Show, Chris Phillips. Thanks for joining the show today, Chris.
Absolutely, man. Appreciate you having me on. Really excited. The best rivalry in college baseball. Drew, it returns this weekend with the 3-game set. Obviously Friday at Clemson, Saturday in Greenville, and then Sunday at Founders, man. I'm looking forward to it. And this is, I tell people all the time, obviously I love covering college baseball, love talking Gamecocks baseball, and this rivalry, special place for me in my heart. Grew up watching it, obviously, as I'm sure you did as well. But it's kind of like my Super Bowl of the baseball season, and I get into it just as much as football. It's forward to a fun weekend. Looking forward to a great conversation. I appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. Appreciate you coming on. So I never thought I would say this, but this weekend I will be wearing a Spurs Up Show branded shirt to one of the games. I appreciate you hooking me up. I don't even know if I told you the backstory, but Matthew, my co-host on the college football show, and I had a season-long bet with a pick'em contest, and came down to the final week, and TCU let me down. They did not cover the spread, and so this weekend I'll be wearing you said it was a Clem Sucks shirt you're giving me?
Yeah, I think we got to roll with the Clem Suck shirt, man. I think that one gets the point across. I think that's profit. There's some other ones we could have done, but you know what? I think that one probably sting the most. So hey, I want to jump in. Obviously, I want to help where I can. So damn Max Duggan and TCU, man. That's a shame.
Yeah. You mentioned it kind of there in the little intro. This is my favorite week of the year. I talked to Coach Lee last night right after y'all's midweek game, and he talked about even just the toll that it takes on the coaches. Sometimes they look forward to Monday after this weekend series because of how much of a gauntlet it is. Heading into this season or this series, what's your impression of Clemson and Coach Backett so far?
Well, first things first, my friend, let me say congratulations. You guys getting Coach Monte Lee on the show. That's a big get. And obviously we both sides, it's kind of interesting. Love Coach Lee. And I know so many guys that, when I was playing high school ball that were recruited by him. And I know guys that played for him at CFC. And no matter what side he's on, I mean, it's just everybody's got great things to say about him. And that's one of the reasons I was so happy, that he came back to Columbia. But, I thought the Backett hire was a great hire. And I know this year, listen, I think it's year coach, especially in baseball. He has none of his own players, right? I know he brought a couple of guys, Willie Weiss being one, the talented reliever over from Michigan. He brought some guys with him, but I don't know that you guys are going to be judging him too hard in his first year. But I thought the Backett hire was a great hire, and obviously, admittedly, I mean it's well documented. I was ready to move on and hire the next coach at South Carolina after the way that last season went. I thought Backett was a great name. I mean, I would have taken Backett at South Carolina, what he did at Michigan. I mean, you think about a Big Ten school, you come down south and, whether it be Clemson, whether it be South Carolina, the resources you have at those two schools with the great history and tradition. I mean, Clemson's basically got all the history and tradition the Gamecocks do without the national championships. I mean, that's really the only difference between the two. So I think Backett is a great hire. I think Clemson, you think of, and I know, we're arch rivals and, we hate each other, but I will say I have a respect for Clemson on the diamond, unlike the other sports. And I don't say that to like start a fuss or an argument, but I just, the reason it's the greatest rivalry in college baseball is because, again, growing up, it was like every year it was top 10 teams. Like every year it was the best of the best. And again, there was kind of this mutual respect, if you will. You knew both teams would be in the postseason. There was a good chance they might see each other. I mean, you think about the history in Omaha in 2002 and 2010 and playing in the regionals in 2012. And so the supers, I should say. Which is a great coach. Everything I've heard about him, I can't say like I know everything about the guy, but he's getting tested early, right? I think I don't know how much attention baseball at Michigan gets, but because I'm not sure if ever he was in a non-conference series like, Clemson UCF, did it ever move the needle to where his comments after a series, who would have ever imagined, right? That people are just, he says what he says about the mouthy Golden Knights and the video happening with the running down the hill. But again, it's just his first season. I'm sure he could have never imagined that 8 games in, they'd be in this kind of position with sort of the kind of madness that's taken place early on. So I like Backett as a whole. I think he'll have a lot of success, but I think Tiger fans obviously have got to be patient with him because especially this year, this roster, what he inherited, it's a roster that has some capable pieces, but I think definitely lacks that star power that Clemson so desperately needs, especially I feel like in the pitching staff and the starting rotation.
Yeah, I think most fans have some realistic expectations in year one. You just have the loud minority on Twitter that are losing their minds already 8 games into the season. But
I will say, though, not to cut you off, Drew, to your point, though, I think of it almost as South Carolina. And are the expectations at Clemson as high as they are at South Carolina for baseball? I think they're pretty high. I mean, I think they're pretty high. So it's hard to watch your team not be good in a sport you feel like it should be good. Like, for example, if South Carolina were to hire Backett and went through the same thing, I mean, my expectations for year one would have been make the postseason. Like, we're still South Carolina. Like, I don't give a damn who the head coach is or what the situation is, but it's just it's so tough. So, I mean, I didn't mean to cut you off there, but I'm sure it's a pressure unlike he's ever experienced. Because at Michigan, I mean, are there expectations for baseball? Do they care? It was just kind of a nice surprise. Now, Backage has got real expectations, but he's also got experience at Clemson, so I'm sure that helps as well.
Yeah, expectations are high. I think a lot of people heading into this season were expecting postseason, and I mean, obviously, it's an early season. We still got a lot of baseball left to play, and that's still possible, but not the momentum that Clemson wanted to head into this rivalry series with. What can Clemson fans expect out of the Gamecocks? What can we expect to see this weekend?
Well, I think first you're starting the bump. You're going to see 3 elite arms in the starting rotation. Will Sanders, obviously the big name, the headliner of the rotation that'll pitch on Friday night at Doug's Kingsmore. I mean, I know Tiger fans are familiar with him from last year, but a guy that's projected to be a first rounder. I mean, the velocity is going to sit mid-90s to high 90s. I mean, he's elite across the board. Hasn't been quite the dominant Will Sanders that we've seen before early in the season, but did not pitch the entire fall as they wanted to save his arm. So, I mean, you're going to see elite starting pitching, all 3 guys, Sanders, Noah Hall, and Jack Mahoney. All 3 are a little bit different, but I mean, it's all high velocity, electric breaking stuff. Noah Hall's got the plus changeup, which I think could be the best pitch on the Gamecocks pitching staff as a whole. Like, it's that good. All 3 guys are immense competitors. And then you look at the bullpen as well. I mean, pitching's the name of the game with South Carolina. They enter the series, the 1.88 staff ERA. Of course, Cade Austin, Matthew Becker, some of the guys you're going to see come out of the pen first, if you will. Chris Veach, who has emerged as your closer. And then in the lineup, I think the impact of Monte Lee, Drew, I think it's been felt early on. I think the approaches, you can tell, and I'm not exactly sure where this offense, what they're going to look like when the dust settles, right? Because when you get in SEC play, right, you get in the conference play, it separates the men from the boys. So we'll see where they finish up. But you can already tell early on in the season, they went out in the portal, added a bunch of different guys from the transfer portal, veteran hitters like a Will McGillis from Southern Miss, a really good program. Caleb Denny from Oral Roberts, Gavin Cassis from Vanderbilt, Ethan Petrie's a true freshman that's hitting damn near 500 for you, one of the best hitters on your roster. So, but the approach is so much different than last year and years prior, where it was just like this feast or famine, home run or nothing type approach. And it just felt like, Drew, over the last couple of years, that scoring runs was like pulling teeth. You know what I mean? Like, it's really did. This year, it's much more, they're finding ways to get on base. The walks are up, the hit by pitches. I mean, it's a crazy stat how often they're getting hit by pitches. And you're seeing more productivity as well. This past weekend against Penn, the competition it was elevated, if you will, and you had to win a couple 1-run ball games, 1-0 and 6-5, and you had to come back on Sunday to win. But I think what Clemson fans can expect to see is also just a really great, resilient team, a team that plays like a team, if that makes sense. So, I think it's going to be a great week and a great series. I think there's a lot of reasons for Gamecock fans to be optimistic about this season and what the season holds. But like you mentioned, it's so early on. And I think back to last year when Clemson started, 14-0, and they weren't very good, right? Like, the season ended up playing out. They weren't very good. So, I'm optimistic. I think there's a lot of reasons. I mean, I think the biggest reason for optimism for South Carolina is the pitching. If you got elite pitching like they've got an Omaha caliber pitching staff, like truly. They've got a pitching staff that you come into every single weekend, like expecting to win 2 of 3 at minimum, right? That's how good, I said it going into Penn last weekend, even if the bats are down a little bit, your arms are so good at what you can roll out there. You're going to be able to hang in there at minimum and beat pretty much everybody on your schedule. So, yeah, I would say to Clemson fans, expect elite pitching. It's going to be tough to scratch out runs, knock on wood, from the Gamecock side. I think a dangerous offense, a much more veteran offense than what you saw last year, and just a gritty ball club that, I think will have a good season, but only time will tell.
Yeah, the pitching staff is strength there at South Carolina. Unfortunately, at Clemson, probably our most weakest point there. When speaking with Coach Lee last night, I asked him about momentum. The Gamecocks undefeated heading into this rivalry series. Clemson on a 4-game losing streak. He seems to think, and I tend to agree with him in baseball, that momentum really doesn't matter all that much. What do you think about the momentum Carolina's bringing into this series?
Well, I think momentum can turn so quickly. You know what I mean? Like, I think momentum's a real thing. I mean, for sure. And I think you can replace the word momentum with confidence, right? When you get on a roll, and there's value in, like, the opening weekend. There's value in winning games 20-3. There's value in winning games like that and bashing it all over the yard and hitting a bunch of homers and setting records, scoring 49 runs in a weekend. there's also value in winning the way you did against Penn, who I think was a really quality club, and you swept a team that was in the mid 40s last year in RPI and was a game or two away from making the regionals. Right, only one team in the Ivy League gets a bid. They've got guys that are going to Vatech and Duke and a couple different ACC schools transferring from there. They got a guy, Wyatt Hensler, that was a third-team All-American last year in D1 baseball, picked him to be the preseason player of the year in the Ivy League. They picked Owen Cody, the Friday night guy at Penn, to be the preseason pitcher of the year. So not a bunch of slouches at Penn, right? I mean, I would kind of equate them to what you just saw in UCF. If not maybe a little bit better. So, but there's value in winning games like that 1-0, 6-5, you know what I mean? And showing you can come back late and be resilient. So I think momentum is a real thing, but I think it's more about confidence. So I think, to speaking to Coach Lee, I think he probably just doesn't want to make too much of momentum to say we're riding some crazy high, because in baseball, you got to be so even keel. You don't let yourself, you have a short memory, good or bad. So, I mean, momentum's kind of, it just sort of is what it is. I mean, listen, there's moments where you step in the box and it looks like a beach ball, and there's other moments it looks like a pebble. And you just pray to God that you're playing your best baseball when it matters most, right? And it can flip like that. I mean, you never know. South Carolina could come in this week and just go ice cold. I mean, and Clemson get red hot. You don't know. That's kind of the beauty of the game, right? But, I mean, the Gamecocks are certainly riding high. I mean, they're coming in with as much confidence as you could ask. And, I'm sure they've got a chip on their shoulder after last year getting swept. I think that was the first time that had happened since the late 90s by Clemson. So, I think this is a team coming in very, very confident, and, we'll see if that pays off for them this weekend.
South Carolina picked up a couple transfers from Clemson this past season. It kind of followed Monty over there. I saw where Jonathan French got his first start of the season last night against A&T. Will Clemson fans see any of these guys in the lineup this weekend?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Drew. And, it's interesting. I was actually talking about this on our podcast previewing the series. It's not quite as big of a storyline as I thought it would be when those guys first transferred over, right? Of course, we're talking about Ricky Williams, Dylan Brewer, and Jonathan French, like you mentioned. Ricky Williams is out for the year, which is unfortunate because he's, I think, an elite talent, would have helped the Gamecocks in the bullpen. And then you look at French and you look at Brewer. Brewer's fighting for at-bats right now, and I'd be honest with you, I'd be kind of surprised if you saw him this weekend. French is the one that I think you may see in some pinch hitting roles, but I think what you're going to see is Talmadge Lecroy at third base. You're going to see Cole Messina, I think, catch all three games. So I don't know that it's much of a storyline anymore from the facing your old team. I mean, it'll be an interesting dynamic for them when, if and when they do get in. And just overall, just seeing their former teammates across the field in the other dugout. But I don't know that it's going to play. Like, I don't know that we're going to have a scenario, and you never know, right? Baseball's a crazy game, but I don't know that we're going to have a scenario where, like, Jonathan French is coming up down 1 in the bottom of the 9th with the bases loaded. He's got a chance to be the hero against his old team. Like, and you never know, right? Baseball's wild, but I don't know that it's playing as much of a role as I thought it would. Now, obviously, the Monte Lee dynamic is really, really interesting, but I thought Coach Lee, you guys had him on the show. He also had his media availability for the week, which I don't think it's coincidence that he had his first media availability of the season, the week of this game. But he spoke on Wednesday afternoon, and, he made a great point that, listen, once that first pitch happens, it's the guys on the field. That's what it comes down to. They're the ones throwing the ball. They're the ones swinging the bat. It's, he ain't going to have a whole lot of say besides just kind of coaching his guys up. So, but it is certainly interesting. And I think, Drew, if anything, it puts more pressure on South Carolina. I do. And especially, too, you look at how it's the series. Clemson's lost 4 in a row. Gamecocks won 9 in a row. And then also you think about this season for Mark Kingston, it's a make or break year. A lot of people's expectations are super regionals or bust. And, while I don't think you have to win this series for Mark Kingston to have a successful year, you could still go to the Supers, and heck, you could still go to Omaha. We've seen it before. The 2010 national champions lost 2 of 3 to Clemson. But I think for Mark Kingston and company, after you take Monte Lee, and as much as we love him, the fact of the matter is this: Clemson fired him. They fired him, right? Because they said he's not good enough. He didn't get it done. You guys fired him. So it's like you take that guy, and then you take 3 of the players from their roster, and if you still lose the series, I just think, you know what I'm saying? I think that'll be a real knock against you. And you lose to Eric Backage in his first season, and now the pressure's ramped up because Clemson's looked terrible early on. It's like there's almost no excuse for South Carolina not to win the series. And I know that's kind of an interesting way to look at it, but it's just because of how early season has played out. So, and I'm not trying to add any extra pressure to South Carolina, but I feel like it's just kind of one of the realities of the weekend if you will. So, pressure's a positive and a negative. Pressure's a privilege, if you will, as they say. But it'll be an interesting dynamic for sure. I know for Monte Lee, it'll be probably pretty weird going up against these guys he has great relationships with and recruited. But I think also, too, I wouldn't be surprised he's got a hell of a chip on his shoulder. And I think this team for South Carolina will want to fight to get one, or to get this one for Monte Lee, if you will.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that sentiment there. I think he's going to have a chip on his shoulder. The weird dynamic or relationship or lack thereof with Coach Leggett and Coach Leggett being back in the dugout there, it should be interesting. So heading into this series, knock on wood, the weather works out Friday for the matchup in Clemson. What are your predictions for this series?
And so, yeah, I have locked in my predictions, Drew. I'm glad you asked. And, I'm going to speak it into existence that the weather's going to work out. Are we going to start at 6 o'clock? I don't know. But I'd like to think we're going to get Friday's game in. The worst case scenario, and I don't want to see, is what happened in 2021 where they moved that game 1 to a Tuesday in May. And it just takes away from the week. Like, at worst, play it Saturday, Sunday, Monday. I'd be game for that. I don't know about y'all, but I'd be game for it. But either way, assuming that they're able to play, I've actually got the Gamecocks taking 2 of 3. And I know that might surprise some people because it's interesting, right? The mindset of South Carolina fans is we're going to sweep. It's going to be an easy weekend. And a lot of Clemson fans feel the same way. Hey, we'd be lucky to win a game. I just look at Clemson as this way. Listen, I didn't think Clemson was going to be very good this year. Year 1 of Eric Backage, they got real holes, real problems. They got talented players, but as a whole, I just don't know that their roster's quite there yet. But I look at it this way. They're desperate. And a desperate team can be a dangerous team. And baseball is a game, especially in this rivalry and this series, you have to expect the unexpected. Now, would it surprise me if the Gamecocks swept? No, it would not, because I think it's a bold take saying they won't, because it's like, okay, well, which starting pitcher are you going against? But, once you get into that bullpen and some – listen, this is a series where things that are out of the ordinary, they become ordinary, or they can happen, right? Guys start walking guys that don't normally do so, guy make an error – hitting with runners in scoring position. It'll be the emphasis on the little things this weekend, Drew, in a series like this, where I think it'll be, again, who was able to avoid the costly mistakes, the walks, the leadoff walks, the 2-out walks, the errors, the, leaving runners stranded, right? The Gamecocks have shown a kind of a not a favorable trend the last couple of games, leaving 19 runners on base in that Sunday game. They still found a way to win somehow. That'll bite you at some point. That's going to get you. I mean, there's no doubt about it. So, is it out of the question to think the Gamecocks sweep? Listen, I think if they win the first 2, they sweep. I don't think they'll lose at Founders Park, but I maybe am going into it a little bit more conservative, and it kind of feels like one of those things where I feel like it's almost just too easy to say South Carolina's going to sweep. It's a rivalry series. Clemson will be up for it. They'll be motivated. Eric Backage is trying to salvage some goodwill with the fan base. He needs kind of that signature series win, and what a series win it'd be for Clemson. I mean, it could completely change the mindset of Tigers fans around the baseball program, at least in his first year. So I do have the Gamecocks winning 2 of 3. I think the pitching is just going to be too much for Clemson. I think the lineup, it'll be interesting. I think they'll get enough. I don't think it's going to be any dominant outburst performance, but, we did see UCF kind of beat up on you guys a little bit and swing the sticks were pretty hot. So I think the opportunity to do that will be there, but it just wouldn't surprise me if Clemson stole a game. Because again, a desperate team can be a dangerous team playing with nothing to lose. And so I think it'll be a great series. It always is. The dramatics will be there. It's a super regional type of feel, and I'm expecting nothing different, but I do have the Gamecocks taking 2 of 3 this weekend.
Well, as much as it pains me to agree with you, I'm thinking that that's the way it's going to end up. My only scenario that Clemson ekes out 2 wins is if that Friday rain happens, and we have a similar scenario as 2 years ago, to where you could pitch Ammons in Greenville on Friday and then use him again later in the year for the 3rd game there. But pending that, I don't see Clemson getting out of this series with more than 1 win. So regardless, I know both programs are excited about it. I know that you and I are excited about it. I'm really looking forward to watching some rivalry baseball this weekend.
Yeah, for sure. And just one more note on that. I would just say, I think it'll come down to South Carolina sticks, man. I mean, I think we all feel confident the pitching will be there, but, is South Carolina able to swing it? And again, it just comes back to those little things, man. It's why I don't give keys to the weekend for baseball. Like, I'll do keys to the game for football and other sports, but in baseball, man, we all know it's all about, can you pitch, can you play good defense, and can you get timely hits. So
Mm-hmm.
the team that does that better will win. And there's talented players on Clemson's side. So the Gamecocks better bring it. But no, it's going to be a great weekend, man. I mean, like I said, I love this weekend. We're doing some live streams for it, but the atmosphere at all three venues will be, again, assuming they play Friday, the atmosphere at all three venues will be electric, and we'll be hanging on every pitch, and can't wait for it.
Absolutely. Chris, thanks for joining. It's a big weekend this weekend for content. And as you mentioned, you're doing some live streams, right? How can people watch those?
Live stream watch-alongs, man. They'll be on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. And I did these during the 2021 season, didn't do it last year, and just felt like it'd be a value add for our audience. It's no secret. I mean, I love being at games, but I create content at a much, much higher level when I'm in the studio, plugged in, have my phone in front of me, have my Mac in front of me, all that good stuff. And so yeah, we'll be doing that again. Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch, the same way that I stream my live show every single day, noon to 2, the Daily Crow. We'll be doing it through those channels. And it's pretty simple, man. It'll just be me mic'd up, watching the game and giving in-game commentary. And I think it will be a value add for our audience. I'm actually really, really excited for the live streams and excited to watch all 3 games. And but I'd also obviously urge Gamecock Nation that's there in attendance, man, be loud and be raucous. And because I know the orange and purple will be. So again, it's going to be a great weekend. And yeah, looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Well, Chris, I appreciate it. And we'll talk soon.
Yeah, Drew, I appreciate you guys. Thanks so much. Best of luck this weekend.
All right. Thanks to Coach Lee, and thanks to Chris Phillips for giving of their time to come in here and preview a little Clemson, South Carolina. This is one of my favorite weeks of the year. It's a huge rivalry. You'd like to think that, you'd like to hope that Clemson would be in a better position than they currently are right now, but it's time to put up or shut up. Coach Bakich in his first rivalry series as head coach at Clemson. Jack Leggett back for his first rivalry series in 7 years. It's going to be a competitive series, and it's going to be fun to watch. I'm looking forward to getting out there in a day or so out of Clemson. Hopefully, weather pending, it works out. Then we turn around and go to Greenville on Saturday before heading to Columbia Sunday. But thank you again for joining the show. It's hard to believe we're already 5 episodes in. And again, if you don't follow us on Twitter, follow us there. Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. We're going to be putting out shorts or clips from our interviews and that kind of stuff on YouTube, and hopefully TikTok this week. So appreciate the support, and we'll talk some ball next week. Peace.